While he didn't want me to read his bio, he's very modest in that respect. I'm going to say some things about him. So, Wade Crowfoot was appointed California Secretary of Natural Resources by Governor Gavin Newsom in January 2019. As Secretary, Wade oversees an agency of 19,000 employees charged with protecting and managing California's diverse resources. This includes stewarding the state's forests and natural lands, rivers and waterways, coast, ocean, fish, and wildlife, and energy development. As a member of the governor's cabinet, he advises the governor on natural resources and environmental issues. Prior to joining the foundation, the office, Crowfoot served as Governor Jerry Brown's administration as Deputy Cabinet Secretary and Senior Advisor to the Governor. In that role, he led the administration's drought response efforts and spearheaded several of the governor's priority initiatives to build California's resilience to climate change. He previously served as West Coast Regional Director for the Environmental Defense Fund and a Senior Environmental Advisor to then San Francisco Mayor Gavin Newsom, where he helped to lead many of Newsom's nationally recognized environmental initiatives. Wade received his bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 1996, and earned a master's degree in public policy from the London School of Economics in 2004, where he graduated with honors. So once again, please help me welcome Secretary Crowfoot.
I asked Kurt not to actually read the whole bio, and you clearly disagree. But in any event, thanks for having me, and big thanks to Mike Cohen and the organizers of this get together. Yeah, just incredible energy and collective experience and insight in this room. I actually think it's safe to say that most everything I've learned about the Salton Sea, I've learned from people in this room. I've been serving as the Natural Resources Secretary for about 8 months, but I've been working on Salton Sea issues for just about 3 or 4 years. And I'm just really thankful to the commitment that that everyone in the room has from different angles on what we're talking about. I gotta say, I love this part of the state, and I think every time I come down here, I think I love it a little bit more. I grew up in Michigan, which has obviously a very different water situation. Grew up on the banks of the Great Lakes. And to me, the beauty of the desert meets the mountains is something I actually never thought I'd have a chance to experience on a regular basis. 2 weeks ago, we were down here for a meeting that Assemblymember Garcia convened, and I discovered Coachella Valley dates, which was the first, which is incredible. I just saw my first or second Roadrunner of my life on the patio. So it's an incredible place, and I think we're all drawn here for the same reason. Maybe from different places, but because there's no place like the Salton Sea in the world. California's largest lake. I think about its beauty as if you put Lake Tahoe in the desert with dramatic mountains in the backdrop. It's true. It's incredible. And it's also, where a lot of Californians make their lives and around which they make their living. And it's got major problems. And frankly, the state has not been proactive enough around its solutions. So mostly I'm down here to indicate our commitment to actually make the progress that we need to make on the Salton Sea. This is my 4th or 5th visit down since I took this post back in January, and I've been down here 4 times. Primarily because actually we have a governor who was down here 2 or 3 times when he was campaigning for office, and actually got educated on the Salton Sea. And one of the things he told me when I took this post is, look, we gotta break through whatever's been holding us back on the Salton Sea and actually demonstrate that we can get things done. So I took that as a challenge, and with sleeves rolled up, that's what we're trying to do. I want to talk today about the progress we're making, but I want to be very clear because a reporter asked me outside, said, really not that much, it doesn't look that different right now. So are you down here to claim credit for something that we're not seeing? And the answer is no. This is, right now, we're really focused on jumpstarting a lot of work that frankly is long overdue. From my perspective, I served 5 years for Governor Brown. During his tenure, the state went from a sort of a state of paralysis on the Salton Sea to action. I think part of that paralysis was created by this thought that doing anything on the Salton Sea was so difficult and so intractable and so expensive. It was a question of where to start. And I'm just being honest. Well, Jerry Brown got the right people to begin to ask the questions of where do we start. He put together a blue ribbon task force that really identified what the state needs to do, what our legal obligation is, because we have legal obligation to do a bunch of stuff, and then identifying sort of how we start. That blue ribbon task force turned into a draft 10-year management plan. That 10-year management plan was made enforceable as what's called a stipulated order by our state regulator, the Water Board. So my resources agency actually has a regulatory or legal obligation to deliver the 10-year management plan. And so then I think really, the Gavin Newsom administration inherited a plan, some other questions, and then sort of, frankly, we're behind the 8 ball because we haven't actually met the milestones in the plan. So we're starting a little bit behind, but I would say actually at least with a really strong foundation to work from. So the way I would characterize and categorize what we're doing is really in 4 buckets. The first one is projects. We have to get things in the ground on the Salton Sea to restore and improve the sea, period. I think if you're somebody if you're a casual local observer, you deserve to be very skeptical because we haven't made progress actually getting projects done at the sea. So first and foremost, we have to make progress on these projects. Our 10-year plan requires us to develop 15,000 acres of habitat at the sea. That's water. That's not only providing habitat for animals, but suppressing dust, hopefully providing recreation, and then another 15,000 acres of dust suppression. So I've been down here with my team that's now being led by a gentleman named Arturo Delgado. Raise your hand if you're in the audience, Arturo. I hope you are, because I'm going to commit you to a lot of stuff. Okay, give away. And Arturo is based down here and is our assistant secretary for the Salton Sea. And he's leading a team down here. And we're focused on getting projects done. So what does that mean? We're going to break ground on our first dust suppression project, hopefully later this year. Next 2 or 3 months, we're going to get it done. It's a small project. It's a burrowing project down in the southeast part of the sea off Bouchard Road. It's going to really be a pilot for us around ensuring that what we're doing to the surface is actually suppressing dust. Very quickly thereafter, we're putting together essentially a programmatic plan to get about 9,000 acres of dust suppression done, which is important, but only part of the solution, obviously. Important to note that our team has identified potential priority areas for that dust suppression. Later this year, in other words, next couple of months, we're holding a public workshop to share with local leaders and residents that map and get community input on where dust suppression is most important. So that will start slow with a small project later this year, but then expand quickly. Imperial Irrigation District, as you know, is already doing major dust suppression. We're sort of following their lead, but at a larger acreage. We're also breaking ground next year on a project that actually retains water in the sea, and that's at the mouth of the New River, about 4,000 acres, called the Species Conservation Habitat Project. Important project for a number of reasons. Assemblymember Garcia actually legislated an opportunity for one of our agencies to do the project in a different way, what's called through a design-build process. So we're going to actually be able to do the project more quickly than we have in the past, and that will generate 4,000 acres of habitat, some passive recreation, obviously dust suppression at the bottom end of the sea. We're also focused with our partners in Riverside County, led by Manny Perez, on developing a North Lake project at the top of the sea. About the same size, 3,700, there around acres that would provide recreation, habitat, and dust suppression at the top of the sea. There's also other projects that are really important that are underway, including Red Hill Bay, which I'm happy to talk about, as well as the Desert Shores project. Increasingly, I've heard from local community residents, whether you're in Desert Shores or Salton City, that there, for a limited amount of money, we can actually bring water back into those keys, back into those communities, which would be really critical for the people living there. So our goal is to actually not do these projects sequentially, because that would be failure, is to do them at the same time. We're actually rolling through these projects. Importantly, that means that we've got a lot of permitting to get done. But again, rather than do it project by project, Arturo is leading an effort next year to essentially get what's called programmatic permitting done on all of the projects in that 10-year management plan, so that we have all the sort of bureaucratic red tape out of the way and we can actually deliver those projects. So that's sort of the near-term projects. The second bucket of activities is really building the partnerships, strengthening the partnerships. So I have to say, your two utilities down here, Imperial Irrigation District and Coachella Valley Water District, have really stepped up and sort of showed us the way in terms of getting things done. The relationship hasn't always been smooth between state agencies and local water districts, but it's actually working very well. And that 4,000 acre project at the mouth of the New River was held up for a couple of years. And IID, the new general manager, Henry Martinez, and the board stepped up and really led towards breaking through essentially a logjam to get that done. Likewise, the water district here at Coachella Valley is really central to the planning on the North Lake project. Also strengthening the relationship with the county supervisors. I mentioned Mandy Perez. Ryan Kelly, chair of Imperial County, has been a real champion. The county just stepped up and is sponsoring the Desert Shores project. So we have counties really on both sides of the lake that are stepping up not only to put more pressure on the state, which frankly we need to hold us accountable. They've also developed enhanced infrastructure financing districts, which is a way to actually generate some local revenue for these projects. The state has about upwards of $300 million to begin these projects, but frankly, we're going to need more. And so local stepping up is really key. We're also working to develop a relationship or build on the relationship with the federal agencies. So we've got some really close partners in the region, including the Bureau of Reclamation, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Geological Survey, and they're right there along with us. You all probably know that the Bureau of Reclamation owns about 15,000 acres of lake bed, along with IID, so they're a real critical partner. And actually, just today, we were upstairs with the leadership of those agencies, actually planning on how we accelerate the projects I just talked about. It's also partnerships with community groups. So there are some community groups that have been at this for a very long while, and I think of Comité Cívico de Valle out of Imperial. Groups like Alianza that's hosting us, Leadership Council, and other community groups. They have to be part of the solution. And that really gets me to my third bucket, which is better community engagement, better public engagement. You may know that the state about a year and a half ago stood up 6 or 7 different public engagement committees. Kind of a recipe for failure. We weren't able to keep up with the tempo of maintaining essentially 6 different committees. So what we've done is essentially step back and work with community groups and community leaders to think, okay, what's a public engagement strategy where we can address all of these issues, but not try to have a bunch of siloed conversations. So we're focused on doing a couple of important things by the end of the year, but they're basic, but they're important. The first is having a website with real-time information on what's happening at the sea and what state and federal agencies are doing. It's going to be saltonsea.ca.gov, and it's going to be essentially one-stop shopping for understanding what's happening. We're also going to get out an electronic newsletter on a periodic basis to identify how local leaders, local community members groups can be involved. And then, more importantly, we're trying to figure out really how do we build in community input into the future of the sea. So it's not just people from the local communities coming and testifying and government agencies ignoring their testimony, but they're actually built in. So there's a group right now, essentially it's called the Community Engagement Committee, that includes both of these local groups and our agencies to actually build out the public engagement process from here. The fourth bucket is planning. I think a lot of the folks I've talked to here today support the 10-year plan, but don't think it's a solution in its own right. And there's been a lot of energy and creativity around solutions, longer-term solutions, and solutions that potentially import water into the sea. So a lot of energy around that. And so one thing we want to be clear on is while we need to maintain focus on getting things done now, we have to meet this sort of this community interest and creativity where it's at and actually assess these proposals for import of water. Now, I'll be the first one to be really direct. I think one of the big question marks about any of those big infrastructure projects is what is the scale of funding that can actually fund an import project. If we're looking at these habitat projects, this dust suppression, we're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars, probably over $1 billion at the end of the day. So there are questions about the financial feasibility of these proposals, but we have to assess them. I know Senator Ben Hueso has been a really strong advocate of the need to think big and to avoid the risk of just focusing on what's in front of you and not thinking broader. Same with Governor Newsom. He's heard from some of you that are on these big ideas. So what we're doing, starting really, moving forward this fall, is bringing in a third party, sort of independent reviewer of these different proposals to assess their feasibility. In other words, it's not going to be like an overly long process, but it's going to be an entity that knows complicated infrastructure and knows financing, that's going to review projects that have been submitted both through an RFI process that the state had, but more recent projects, to really understand which projects actually have the potential to pencil out, in which case could move to the next phase of actually a deeper feasibility assessment. I think it's really important that we work toward improvements, but don't lose sight of what the long-term vision is for the sea. For some people, it's a perimeter lake. For others, it's actually filling the entire seabed. For others, it's less of an ambitious vision. But the point is, while we make progress right now and demonstrate that we can actually get things done to stabilize and improve the sea, we need to look up and out towards that long-term vision. I think one of the big questions is the amount of water that is currently flowing into the sea and how many projects that actually can support. And if given that there's some limitation to water in the sea, what does it look like to try to find more water? And how much would that cost, and is it feasible? So that's something we're committed to. This is not an or, it's an and. There are a lot of folks in the room that are really focused on getting stuff done now, and we're right there with them. And there are a lot of folks in this room and in this community that are also looking and thinking big ideas in the long term. And we want to be right there assessing those ideas as well. So I'll just say, we will make progress. The progress won't be as fast as I'd like. It certainly won't be as fast as the governor would like. But I know that beginning in 2020, you'll actually see projects getting on the ground. You'll see this discussion moving forward on how we're going to get 30,000 acres done of the 10-year plan, and ultimately also this discussion on what are the big ideas that could potentially work. I'm really excited by this, and I'm energized by this. This is one of, I think, the most important priorities that I'll oversee in my time in state government, and I'm really looking forward to partnering with all of you. So that's the end of my prepared remarks. I want to give an opportunity to invite questions from the crowd. I will say, if you're able to ask questions in a fairly short order, we can get a lot of questions answered. So I'll ask somebody maybe to grab a roving mic and entertain the first question.
Yeah. The 10 years I've lived in this vicinity, there have been many proposals that have been sent up to Sacramento with all kinds of feasibility studies on water import. Why would they not be considered at this time? Maybe it's too late.
No, I mean, I think
good.
Yeah, there have been. This is my understanding is that there have been different proposals of different levels of detail submitted at different times. We started an RFI process, I think actually before this governor took office, to try to collect those proposals. Others have come in since then. The goal here is to actually capture all of those proposals in one place, and with one independent review, actually assess the initial feasibility of each one. At the end of the day, what we want to do is identify which proposals, what ideas actually are feasible and move forward. We're going to remain focused on these near-term projects, but so if something got submitted 3 years ago, or it's not ineligible for being reviewed for feasibility now. The goal is to capture the entire universe of projects for review.
Secretary.
Yeah.
Secretary Crowfoot, thank you for taking the long-term seriously. And just a simple question on, well.
And I can repeat it. I can repeat the question. I can repeat it. If you project, I'll repeat the question.
You know, I'll just speak loud. So with respect to the proposals that you already have and the new ones that you see, have those of us who have previously submitted proposals, is it okay for us to update and add new information to those?
Absolutely.
And second question, do you have a defined level of detail and standards for what you want to see in proposals?
Good question. So the first question was, if a group or somebody has submitted a proposal before, could they update their proposal with new information? I said yes. And then the question is there a specific level of detail? There will be, and we will need to put a template out to ensure that there is enough information so it can be assessed, but we're also not asking people to do more work than is appropriate. And my guess is, if there's already work done and it's a big, long proposal, it would be most likely appropriate to include, that other materials in appendix.
Thank you.
I spoke with Bruce Wilcox a few years ago, and he was unwilling to consider this. But now that there's a new request for proposal, it seems that some of the best dust mitigation is actually done in the practices of farming. And you have a lot of acreage opening up that could potentially be adapted with different farming practices that would actually lead to revenue from that instead of just expense. And would that be something that would be considered within this?
Absolutely. So, I think as it relates to, first of all, I've heard about farmers here who are actually able to control dust because they've been living inside the sea for a long time. Exactly. And so actually I heard about an idea, or at least something that had happened before maybe, around providing micro loans for dust suppression and actually getting local agricultural producers to do that. Look, I'm very open-minded, and I think our team is very open-minded, and I actually think that dust suppression work doesn't necessarily need to be folded into the larger, big infrastructure deal. We should really, through Arturo, be entertaining a conversation about near-term dust mitigation or suppression. Like from our perspective, I know very little about it, but I know that there are some methods that IID has used to some effect. But from my perspective, if you could actually control dust while pulling revenue from land that is recently exposed, that's a win-win.
With tiny amount of water.
With tiny amount of water use, yeah. So I think that's we should definitely look into that, and it's great too if it can be something that local landowners can actually participate in. Yes.
Mr. Secretary, you talked primarily about the Salton Sea, which for this audience is very appropriate. But you did not mention the Colorado River, which is in a structural water supply deficit of about 1 million acre-feet a year. The interim guidelines expire in 2026, so all 7 basin states will be developing their strategies for the future. In 1968, the Congress authorized at federal expense augmentation of the Colorado River for 2.5 million acre-feet a year. And with that in mind, the ability to leverage that federal cost with the state cost to augment the Salton Sea is a tremendous opportunity. And is that something that you and your administration would support?
Well, let me say this about the Colorado. I think you're right. The way I think about California water and California water supply is there's a lot of rivers that supply our water in California, but there's 3 rivers that are sort of the largest and most significant as it relates to water supply. It's the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers up north that flow through the Delta, out through the Golden Gate, and it's the Colorado River. And the Colorado River is really the lifeblood of the Southwest, and there are changing conditions along the Colorado River where we're looking at, over time, less and less snowpack that melts slowly in the spring that feeds that system. And so there needs to be much more collaboration on the Colorado River than there has been in the past. I have to applaud, though, those 7 states and the US and Mexico. There is pretty impressive collaboration happening on the Colorado River all around this drought contingency plan. We have Chris Harris, who is here today, who you heard from. He's the chair of our Colorado River Board. And to me, it's almost, you know, the collaboration on the Colorado River is as an example to other parts of the state. Salton Sea is part of that equation. And I think that's what IID has been saying all along, is that the Salton Sea needs to be solved as part of the broader Colorado River solution. And there is not a Colorado River solution without solving for the Salton Sea, because the Imperial Irrigation District, which is of course a senior water right holder, you know, it's not fair to have an environmental catastrophe in its backyard if it's collaborating with the rest of the Colorado River. So in any event, the Colorado River is part of that, very open to creative solutions. I have to say the Bureau of Reclamation in the Southwest, in leadership of Terry Folt, who's here today, is critical in all of the progress that's happened to date. And I know he and his staff are committed to being partners on the Salton Sea. So I'm actually really optimistic in this aspect. Yeah.
One question. That's great that there will be another request for information for long-term solution for the restoration of the Salton Sea. I just noticed that some people are also talking about 10 years plan, including you, and some people would like to use that land of exposed lake bed for agriculture. I would like just to warn that if we are going to do long-term solution, importing seawater, and cover all that land, just to be careful, I respectfully urge you to consider that and reconsider. Because if you're going to put, I had a proposal for long-term solution for the restoration of the Salton Sea that will go back to the 1950s and 60s level. We can restate marine and everything. I'm providing vertical circulation of the water, taking high salinity water, bringing less salty water from ocean. In 10, 15, 5, 6, 7 years, will be equalized the salinity of the ocean. But again, those projects that are requiring to do dust mediation will be flooded if long-term solution is accepted. So just kind of respectfully asking to consider that.
Yeah.
Because you'll be losing time and money. And also, 10 years plan. My plan is 5 years. In 5 years, we can have functional lake. So also consider that too. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think the point I draw from your comment is the projects we put in place now need to be no regrets projects. In other words, they can work with a broader, longer term vision. So, you know, and it's my belief that both the project at the mouth of the New River and the North Lake project can work in a future in which we would have more water, whether it was in a perimeter lake or more broadly through the seabed. So the goal is to actually make investments now that improve conditions, but that don't necessarily get in the way of a future vision. Now, it's one thing if you were talking about, you know, covering the whole seabed with agriculture. That would obviously be a little limiting towards reintroducing water. But I think in this case, I think what we're talking about as it relates to dust mitigation is really strategic dust mitigation where it's worse right now. And if something much bigger and much better comes along in the future, you know, Godspeed.
Okay, thank you. So it was about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we had the most recent RFI with 15 presenters, and through what we understand to be a relatively secret selection process between Tetra Tech and Bruce Wilcox, the top 3 contenders were presented, while others were left out. I think we're temporarily casting that aside. We're gonna have a new process where there'll be another committee to select who will present for seawater import. And I would propose that within this room, we have at least one qualified person from outside of the usual selection, that they should be someone who is directly affected, perhaps someone that lives at or near the sea, be included, have a voice in that selection process. Nothing secretive. And because we absolutely have to move forward towards seawater import. Every day the situation gets worse. We have to understand without seawater import, the sea cannot be restored, and that contour plowing does not restore the sea. Thank you.
Yeah, look, I think we need to be transparent about the process we put in place to assess those proposals. And I think that'll dovetail well with just a lot more direct communication and transparency writ large. So I certainly expect that we will do that. We need to really assess what's viable. And I've heard from a number of people, a number of different ideas, some broadly conceptual, not commercialized technology, other big infrastructure firms. And I just think we need a fair process to really understand what's actually, could be implemented. And specifically, what would be a funding source or even the potential funding sources to fund that. And that's our commitment. Yeah, right here.
Yes, two issues. One, as far as seawater import, one of the reasons we're told that it hasn't happened or can happen is that we can't talk to Mexico. Why can't we talk to Mexico? Because we haven't talked to Mexico. And this is something that could be done today, not wait until you've chosen through what plans. And Mexico has sent up delegates up here numerous times and not been able to talk to our officials. So the issue is not Mexico, the issue is the US. The second issue is the 10-year plan is the, Owens Lake is the model. Owens Lake is a flawed model for the Salton Sea. The Salton Sea is 4 to 5 times the size of the 10-year plan, and when the Owens Lake was drained, the only fertilizers there were from cows. We have 100 years worth of farm chemicals and intensive farming, 2 to 3 crops a year, 100 years worth of chemicals that are in the Salton Sea that we need to keep covered. And the 10-year plan does not address this, and Owens Lake model does not. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Look, as it relates to dialogue with Mexico, actually this is a great time for conversations with Mexico. Mexico has a new governor-elect of Baja California who knows a lot about water. He was actually served on the elected water board of Otay Water District, which is a suburb of San Diego, who actually knows a lot about water. One thing that we're really focused on working with his administration on is water quality coming out of the New River and the Tijuana River. These are major issues for Calexico and in San Diego and downriver communities in the New River. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll be talking to Mexico about a lot of things, and this should be one of them, as well as the Colorado River, just more broadly. Then, as you know, I think the breakthrough that at least I see in my mind is not pitting sort of near-term action against long-term vision. And so from my perspective, the 10-year plan, I hear from a lot of people that are desperate for actually action on the sea. Action on the sea that's not going to screw up, a bigger, broader, longer-term vision, but action on the sea. So I'm actually confident that we can address, do the near-term projects and the long-term, assess the long-term vision. But I take your point around the difference of composition of the lake beds, and I'll take that back to our team, just to ensure that we're not necessarily applying dust control techniques on Owens, on the Salton Sea that are only appropriate in that other situation. Good.
I can talk loud.
Yeah.
I'm Lucy Lever from the University of Minnesota by way of UC Riverside, Go Highlanders. You've spoken about the Salton Sea in a broader water use context. Do you have any thoughts about transferring or leasing agricultural water for use in Salton Sea projects? Essentially an extension of mitigation water required by the USA.
Good, so let me try to repeat that, you tell me if I get it wrong. So the question was, have we thought about essentially transferring water that's now being used by agriculture for projects on the Salton Sea? more or less.
That's nailed it.
So I think it's really important on this to work with our local partners. And I know, for example, that farmers here want to make sure that, the Salton Sea is not being restored at their expense. And so what has enabled really productive agriculture in this region has been senior water rights. And, for good reason, those are guarded closely. And so I think we want to work with, local irrigation districts and the water districts, carefully to utilize water that we can, but without setting up any competition or perceived, capture of water that's being used for other reasons.
Thank you.
You can project now.
Thank you. I had a question about citizen science projects. We have a lot of educated people here, but there are a lot of people surrounding the sea. In the East Valley, or here at UCR, there's a lot of people who would like to be more educated on it. And so I was wondering if you had any thoughts of how to educate and engage the community, such as with citizen science projects or hackathons related to this Salton Sea.
Yeah, good. Just because some people may have missed the first question. How do we engage people in the communities around the sea that are not in this room or that don't follow it as closely? I think there's a lot of potential. I think part of it is following the leadership of community groups. So one example is Alianza, one of the organizers of today, actually does a program with youth, high school youth, where they actually, essentially, I think this last summer developed a magazine about the sea, where it was sort of half journalism, investigative journalism, half sort of artistic production, et cetera. So creative ideas like that around engaging people on the sea. I think the notion of residents doing science is also really promising. And another group called Comité Civico down in Imperial Valley actually does that, where they're, as I understand it, actually monitoring air quality from mobile devices, so that the communities actually don't have to trust monitors maintained by the state or federal government. They're actually engaged in the science themselves. So I think that there's a lot of potential for that. I think it's going to require creativity and a lot of partnerships with local communities around what the residents actually want to do and what leaders think can actually engage those residents. Good. I've almost exhausted all the questions. Yes, in the back.
Over the last, I really like what I'm hearing from you, Secretary. I'm really grateful that you're here. But besides that, over the last 8 or 10 years, there's been a lot of work done, intellectual work on various responses to the water board meetings or anything like that. Could you, I don't know what your feelings would be about having one of your people go back and review that for fertile ideas that might contribute to the progress faster.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So I think the point the gentleman raised is, look, there have been a lot of good ideas and important input provided to state agencies, including the water board, over the last decade. And rather than just sort of reinvent the wheel, can we go back or can we review those records or that input for good ideas? I think that's a great suggestion. And Arturo, who's our leader down here, just is taking notes. So I think you made. I think it's a resonant suggestion. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. So we're taking full circle, Kurt. Yeah. Let me get your Kurt's bio.
I just want to go back to this question that Lucy raised a little bit earlier. And the idea when 2017 came around.
When 2017 came around, we weren't ready. And to my mind, we weren't ready to stop the mitigation water going to the Salton Sea because we hadn't come up with solutions yet. So in that sense, what we've done is we've asked the locals to bear those costs in terms of air quality, health effects, and ecosystems. In this sense, I don't think the idea is to make the farmers bear the costs. I think the farmers should be paid for water that they give up, just like they do when they give up water to the Met or when they give up water through conservation activities to San Diego. But it seems to me that the right thing to do then, rather than ask the locals to bear those costs, was to somehow come up with a scheme where you pay farmers to keep water going to the Salton Sea until you come up with a comprehensive solution for it in the short term.
Yeah, so I mean, look, I certainly wasn't involved in California government back in the quantification settlement agreement. And I think, knowing what we know now, I think a lot of people in this room would have very good suggestions on how it could have been structured differently. The way I see it is, moving forward, what can we do constructively? And I hear your point, which is there a program in which you could actually, pay farmers, a fair rate to actually let some of their water flow into the sea? And I'll just say, we're very open-minded. I mean, I think what I'm trying to convey here is we're focused on the stuff in front of us, but we're also open-minded to other ideas and big ideas. And so, for example, in terms of academic partners, really bringing forward creative ideas is helpful. One thing you can't do in state government, you don't have a lot of time anyways, is to reflect and be creative, because you're on to the other thing. So if there are creative ideas in this room, whether it relates to long-term import projects or shorter-term options, we really want to be, we're going to listen. And not only through, once annual summits, but you're going to hear more about this community engagement process, so you can really come to the table. My goal is, if we do this summit next year, Mike, no pressure, is that we're actually coming back and we're seeing some of these projects move forward thanks to the good work of our state team, that you're feeling actually more engaged, that you actually understand that what's underway, and you feel like you have more of a seat at the table than you have in the past. So let me stop there and let you move on with your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. In terms of speaking of outreach, I know that Michael and I and Tamara are exhausted putting this together with all the help that we had. But if there isn't funding there, I mean, there's economies to scale with this type of outreach strategy.